What if I were to suggest that you play a key role in the awakening world? And that you are watching this because you have heard the call. We can start right now by opening our hearts and minds. Welcome to the awakening world.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Awakening World. I'm Love Coach Scott Thomas, and I am honored to be your host for all of these shows that we've been doing for 3.5 years now. And, you know, we've done over 500 shows, but tonight we're on a topic that we've never tackled before. We're going to be talking with several people who part of their life's challenge, the big part of their life's challenge probably, is that they were adopted. Now, I'll kind of set the framework for a moment that some of you who are regulars have heard me talk about the meaning of life, and that through all the different spiritual teachers that I've had the opportunity to work with, all the people I've worked with near-death experiences, there's definitely a general consensus that the meaning of life on this planet is we're here to learn to love, starting with ourselves. And that everybody has their unique wounding, disillusionments, challenges, and learning to still love themselves and ultimately then love others is, I believe, our journey in life. And I'm really grateful for these 5 brave souls who have agreed to come here and share about something that very few of us can really ever imagine what it's like to be adopted. And each person's story is a little bit different. So we're going to hear their stories. We're going to hear about their journey of learning to love themselves and where they are in the process, because we're all, if we're still in body, we still have lessons to learn, don't we? Now, you may notice that Trish is not here, although she's supposed to be. So hopefully she's going to pop in soon. And Omashar is in England. He made it safely to be visiting his mom. But God bless Omashar. He created several pre-recorded songs specifically for the shows that we're going to do while he's gone. And we're going to start off with this pre-recorded song from Omashar, specifically for tonight's show on adoption. And this is a song that's called Another Dawn. Another Dawn. So let me go to that.
Another dawn, another day. Innocent child coming your way. I've been wondering about my life. Oh yeah. Wondering about my state of mind. But then I heard if not for yourself? How do you feel? And why do you cry, 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 cry? Shooby-doo-wop. The sun is warming up my mind. Ocean breeze blows me away. And yet still, I've been wondering about my life. Oh yeah, wondering who will take my place. Then I heard, who is it for? If not for yourself, how do you feel? And why do you cry, 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 cry? Who is it for? If not for yourself, how do you feel? And why do you cry, 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 Who is it for? If not for yourself, how do you feel? So come on, let's fly. Come on, let's fly.
Thank you, Omashar, who's in England, for making that pre-record. And what a beautiful set of lyrics. I'm curious as we talk to our presenters, our adoptees, how those lyrics touched your heart. You know, one challenge, by the way, of playing pre-recorded videos is I can't spotlight Eleanor Joy and those of you who are dancing and moving, because I would lose what we're watching with Omashar. So, but I appreciated that Eleanor Joy, you were still dancing. So I put you in the corner. People could see little Eleanor Joy dancing away there. So thank you for that. I'm going to go to Roger first. It was actually our dear friend Roger Tellefson, who's been to both Global Peace Tribe retreats, and his wife Bonnie, of course. And Roger's adopted, and he's who first suggested doing a show on this topic. And so I'm going to bring you on, Roger. First of all, thank you so much for being with us, for putting this show together, inviting some of your friends. And I'm going to ask everybody the same opening question. If you could just maybe start by giving us, we'll get later to how you've managed things, but maybe just tell us your story. If you could just give like the 2 to 4 minute, your story of your challenges, and then we'll come back after we hear everybody's story of their basic challenges of their adoption. And then we will, of course, come back and ask about some of the tools that you've developed to manage. But go ahead and start by telling us your story, Roger.
Wow. My story is not, well, each one of us is unique, but similar. Not identifying or relating or to my adopted parents at all. not receiving the love and nurturing that I needed growing up. I, went through school. I got married directly from home to marriage, and I recently found out that was not a good thing to do. I've got 2 kids, 43, 46, son 43, daughter 46, and I'm not going to go there right now, but it's okay. The biggest challenge was, the issues were, being separated at birth. That's a trauma, first trauma, if you will. Another trauma was in the home, having issues with my, I'll just, for simplification right now, bullying dad, adopted dad. And he didn't treat like a neighbor lady across the street would not come over when he was there and talk with my adopted mom. So that'll give you an idea. But yeah, going through school and not being able to put down medical records or medical background because you didn't know. So it's been interesting to the journey has been, okay, but to have my adopted dad, I liked to draw growing up, and having him tell me I'd be nothing more than a pencil pusher was like, really? But I think the biggest loss or trauma was losing my wife in our 3rd heart attack in end of September 2011.
Mhm.
It took me some therapy, being prescribed for PTSD, and then really waking up from that in fall of 2015, and it's been a journey. What I found interesting enough, when I was on dating sites, each lady I met taught me a lesson. So, but yeah, it's still there, and the vacancy, or not vacancy, that's not the right word, but the emptiness of not having that connection with a biological. I mentioned my birth mother. Okay, I did meet my biological father, but he lived up in, if you know where it is, North Susanville, which is Northeast California. And because I was, I had a family and working, it was not easy to get a connection with any of them. My birth mother moved from just south of Stockton, California to Las Vegas several months after I met her. And it just became challenging to really establish a relationship. So, it's, I'm kind of like, I'm going to stop right there and just open it up to anybody else that have any, just
Thank
somebody
you.
else
Yeah,
talk.
thank you, Roger. And
I'm good with that right now.
we're getting a chance to get to know you a little bit. And so thank you for sharing a little bit about some of the challenges of your life. And I think we'll go to Nicole next. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Scott.
Thanks for being with us. Coming to us from Ohio.
Yes, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. So it's 9 o'clock here. It's getting a little dark in my office, but hopefully you can still see me
We
and
still
hear me
see you.
okay.
Yeah. If it gets too dark, try and maybe find a lamp that you can put on or something.
I have my computer screen here.
Okay, good. But right now we see you just great. So
Okay, good.
tell us a little bit about your story, Nicole.
Sure. Yeah, I was born to a teenage runaway from South Carolina, and she actually ran away to Ohio and had me here in Ohio, where I still reside. And I learned through my self-discovery and search process that she left me with a babysitter at the age of 3. And that babysitter actually ended up becoming my adoptive father. He was a single veteran just out of Vietnam, trying to put his life back together. And he felt like I was a sign and for some responsibility in his life. And I, unlike a lot of my adoptee friends, I have a great relationship with my adoptive father. And I still felt the pain and the abandonment issues and that loss of being separated from my mother. So I think it's really important to understand if you're not adopted and you're around adoptees or have adoptees in your life, that while, there can be situations where there's a positive parent-child relationship after adoption, never forget that all adoption begins with loss, and a family has to be separated to make a new family. And we adoptees carry that loss with us the rest of our lives. Going on about the challenges that you asked about, I really felt abandonment issues as a child. I felt like a misfit because I didn't look like anyone in my family. I didn't look like anyone in my community and even at school. And I just kind of felt like an alien. And despite the love of my amazing father and the rest of my family, I had a great support system. But that's another key for me, is that love just isn't enough. And adoptive parents need to understand that, because that gap and that loss, nothing can replace that biological connection. Early in my career, I actually learned more about adoption as a lifelong journey when I volunteered for a local organization that supports everyone impacted by adoption, called Adoption Network Cleveland. And that's when I first came in contact with other adopted people and adoptive parents and birth parents. And it was really an epiphany, because I began to understand that some of the feelings that I was having, some of the discontent and challenges I had when I was very young, were natural and part of my adoption experience. I really didn't know and wasn't able to connect those feelings before then. So I felt very uncomfortable in my own skin and like something was fundamentally wrong with me. So that was a really important epiphany. And I've carried that with me and realized that I might not have had a choice as a child, but I do have a choice now. And it's important to really build awareness about the lifelong challenges of being adopted. And I have to say, it struck me again later in life, even though I'm on this great healing journey of self-discovery. When I first had my son in 2000 and I saw my first genetic mirror and someone finally looked like me, amazing. But it was also really sad, because in that moment when I first held my son, realized that no one has ever looked like me. And when I heard the doctor say, "He looks like mom," I was just so elated. So, having my own child has been very healing for me. Seeing that genetic mirror has been very healing for me. And connecting with other adoptees in the adoption community has been very healing for me. And I would say that that's something else that I want everyone to really take away, is that it's important to connect with others like we are today and share that experience, because adoptee to adoptee connections and beyond can be very, very healing. And I would love to continue and to learn from others. And some of the ways I do that I'll share when we come around to how we cope with this challenge of being adopted.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you. You're a beautiful speaker. She's back. I'm going to go to my wonderful co-host who has been away, traveling all over the world, it seems. Welcome back, Trish.
Thank you.
We've
I
missed
wasn't around
you.
the world. I was just around the U.S. Taking a universal forced break. All of the things that had landed in my life in some direction just went, and I was like, oh, it's wanting me to take a vacation, more like send multiple appeals for multiple days in a row until I got what I wanted.
Well, welcome back. It's good to have you here. And I know that you have, although you weren't personally adopted, you have a lot of history of adoption in your family. So I'd love to hear kind of a little bit about that. And then as you've listened to Nicole and Roger, any reflections, and then we'll go to Joanne and Elizabeth.
Oh yeah. I have a lot of family that has been adopted. So one of the things that we found out a few years ago is that the man who my mother thought was her father was not her father. And through 23andMe, and that she had, I don't know, like 8 different siblings, but she had thought this man who had adopted her was her dad for so long. But there was always that feeling, like you all were saying, is like, she's like, I just don't belong in my family. Then there's the man that my mother recently married. Well, recently meaning some years ago. Oh, heard. And the man that my mother recently married had adopted 3 boys, and 2 of and they're all brothers. So 2 of the 3 boys had the same mother, and then the 3rd brother, the youngest, had a different mother. Same father. And his experience is very different than the rest of the family of the other boys. The other 2 really like dove in, and this, his experience was really disjointed, and that he's still seeking sort of like connection to himself and a place where he can ground in. And his mother passed before he could meet her. And then the last one, which was a really also similarly as impactful as my mother finding out that her dad wasn't her dad. I mean, we had thought that she was Iroquois for, I don't know, for most of her life until way late into her almost 50s, when we took 23andMe and found out that we were Romanian and Jewish. It was very surprising for her. But the other one was really profound for me, is to see my stepdad, who, I mean, he didn't adopt me, but he like really took me in. He never had any children of his own. And about 2 years before his death, he got a call from his sister and said, there's a young man who says that you might be his dad. And he's like the most loving man I've ever met. Like, my stepdad was a really loving man. And this other man was just like 40 years old at this time. He was just like him, like the biology of who he was, like his mannerisms, the language that he speaks, how he looks, the things he was interested in, like motorcycle riding and like guitar playing, like the similarities between the 2 of them. And they had never met, like my stepdad Miles never even knew, because the woman that he had a child with never told him, and like left his life completely.
Wow.
And he has recently found a sister in his. So my stepsister, who we thought that she was also step, like a kind of taken in on the family. Miles was just a really loving person. So he was always like, oh, the kids, come on, you know? And we didn't know that she was his daughter as well. We found out after he had passed. So now we're this just cute little Mod Podge family of just silly. So my family has a lot, like my interactions, like have a lot of adoption ties, and I'm so grateful to have these people in my life.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. Well, we're certainly going to hear more from Trish, but we've got two other adoptees with us. So I'm going to go to Elizabeth next. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Scott. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. My adoption story started at birth. I was placed into foster care and adopted from that point. I was adopted into a family that had 3 biological children. And then I was adopted, and then my little sister was adopted as well. We are not blood. So we had a pretty large family. My story is I was actually found by my birth mother, my early 20s. And I had received a letter from an investigator saying somebody was looking for me. And at about age 9, I was told that I was adopted. So when I received that letter, I was like, who else could it be? And so I met her and I had a relationship with her until she passed. And about five years after we connected, she had called me to tell me that my father had passed away. And I have to say, like, I guess, like, from that point on, like, for the last 15 years, I was like, wow, like, there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't think about, like, kind of missing that boat. And I think that comes from, as an adoptee, just knowing, like, where I come from. Like, there's such an emptiness when I don't know where I come from. Like, I don't know who I look like. And I have to share that each time I share about my experience as an adoptee and my story, like, I've been on a healing journey for a really long time, and it's still absolutely, there's parts of my story that still move me. Place of, like, I'm just so deeply proud of myself and my journey. And so I was like, wow, like, I don't know what he looks like. And I wanted to, like, see a picture. Until last year, I was just like, it was like tearing me up inside. And I took a DNA test a few years back. And I was like, okay, well, my only thread to the paternal side of my family is through my grandfather. And I knew who my grandfather was. My mother had told me. So I started a search. I received help from a couple of genealogists and started down that journey. And just to make it easy, after a few months, we found out that that man who I was told was my father was not my father. And that was such a whirlwind of emotion for me. And to find out that he was still alive. And I was just like, wow. Like, I was just, like, excited, because whether I met him or not, I was just like, there was literally, when I got that news, there was, like, some immediate healing that happened in my body for me. I felt like I was closer to my roots and closer to home. And so for the paternal side of my family, I actually sent letters and connected this year in March, and have met part of my paternal side of my family. So It's a little bit about like my adoptee journey. I would say too, like my whole life, just I didn't look like my adopted family. I'm tall and blonde. That is not what my siblings look like. And that was just always really hard for me. And just knowing like, just feeling a level of like being unsettled in my body, probably my whole life. Not feeling like I belong, not feeling like I really could participate in a lot of conversations about like families and like our parents. And I was like, it just didn't add up for me. And I know that everybody, like every adoptee I've spoken with has a different story, yet very similar in a lot of ways. And I definitely felt alone growing up, that my experience was really unique until I started connecting with adoptees. And I truly wish that when I was younger, I would have met other adoptees. I feel like that would have been really supportive for me. However, I didn't meet other adoptees, or at least know they were adoptees, until last year. And I will say that that's been so healing to hear other people's stories, and yet so different, so similar to the things that I feel like I've walked through in my life. And other adoptees are like, yes, absolutely, like me too. And I'm like, just that alone has been so healing for me in my experience. So struggling with, who do I look like growing up, feeling like I don't belong. Yeah, and I guess I'll answer like how I've coped with that over the years, and like healing that I brought to my body when we move around the room again. Thanks for that.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. Each of your stories is so deep, so powerful. We're going to hear from Joanne, and then I'll come back to Trish. Hi, Joanne.
Hi,
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us. And by now, you know what we're going to do. We're going to ask you to kind of share just your essential story.
Yes, I was placed for adoption at birth. My birth mother was cheating on her husband. She was told not to have any more children because it was doing more damage to her heart. She placed me up for adoption. She doesn't appear to be any part of any of this deception. And she had kids that were in high school. At the time, my siblings were in high school, 2 of them, and one was 6 years old, and from a small mining town in Nevada. And I can't imagine what it was like for the kids, because everyone in the town knew that my mother was sleeping around. I went searching for her only because my adoptive mother and stepfather wouldn't tell me the truth, to so much deception. My stepfather was a medical doctor, and he said that he thought his inheritance would be more important than the truth. And I said, well, you don't know me very well, I guess. And we parted ways and never spoke again. I went and found that it was just such a convoluted story where there's so many players, so much garbage. Like I said, the doctor walked out of the hospital with me, handed me to some people that I was not supposed to go to. They had already adopted another child 2 months prior. The state of Nevada says there's so much deception. The judge is even involved in it. And he signed a waiver not to check the home that I was being placed in, because it said I was related to someone. But my brother, who's not even related to me, who's 2 months younger than I am, that was also placed in the same home, has the same waiver in his file. They said the adoption was never sealed, or not sealed. It was incomplete. everywhere I would turn, everyone I'd spoke to in the state agencies and everything were trying to help me, but they would never say, they'd help me as much as they could, but they'd never say, hey, we'll try to help you figure out what to do with no birth certificate, you know. Vital Statistics finally found a birth certificate for me. I was still listed as my birth mother's child, and they said it wasn't a mistake. It was just that the adoption was never completed. And my parents divorced. My adoptive parents divorced when I was 6. It's the last time I ever saw my adoptive father. They were taking him away in a police car late at night for a drunken brawl with my mother, my adoptive mother. It's a long story, and it's never ending. It's still not ended. But I've learned a lot about myself, how strong of a person I really am. People are really surprised that I could walk away from my parents, my adoptive mother and stepfather, because my adoptive mother was extremely abusive and extremely narcissistic. And that I had courage because I didn't act like I did. I didn't act like that type of person who would just walk away and say, hey, I'm better than this. But I've come a long way, and I've done it alone for a long while. And then of course, I found my my maternal side, and it's been very difficult for my siblings to accept me because I was born, from an affair that was everybody in the whole town knew about. But I had the wrong father for over 20 years. The miners told me the miners that worked in the mine with my mother's husband said that it was one man, and it turns out it was a different man. And 23andMe, a brother showed up on there, and I said, who are you? I know who my birth family is. And he said, I don't know, but let's work through this. And we were only 6 months apart in age. And it turns out that it's actually his father was my father. And that family has been wonderful to me, absolutely loving to me. And it's one of those stories you'd never believe if you, because everyone was saying that it was this other man was my dad. And that family was really rude to me and mean. So, but that's part of my journey.
Wow. I'm going to go to you, Trish.
Joanne, that's a lot. All of your experiences are a lot to be separated from your biological heartbeat of your life, and then to be treated poorly again and again. Joanne, I'm sorry. There's so much about attachment. That's like the research around attachment now is deeply, it's very widely available. And most of it isn't even talking about adoption, right? Which is a very different type of attachment wounding. Right? So you're not with your biological family, you're not with the like that. There's like a thing, like a language that happens between people you share DNA with. Does this make sense? Right. This is why studies with twins are so fascinating, right? Because they speak in a language, but how your parents, you can hear something. They can, my mom used to hear me crying when I was at my dad's house 300 miles away, and she would call me. But I know that you never got that. And I just want to say that I'm feeling your stories, And I know that some of the people that adopted you were loving and some of them weren't. And I love that you have found communities and people who do love and care for you. That's how we live in this crazy world together, right? Roger, you have your hand up?
I did. I just wanted to add that what you're speaking to, it's called biological mirroring. And that connection that you don't have growing up, like, oh, you don't look like, who do I look like? I didn't look like any of my family, really. Never had that connection. I mean, you have that connection in the womb, but that knowing your history, your family history, and that biological mirroring is important, very important. I found, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I guess while we've got the spotlight on you, Roger, I want to get to the next question. The next question is, what's one tool or one practice that has helped you, and let's stay focused on adoption, to manage being an adoptee? What's one tool you can share that has really helped you with managing this?
I would say, really, a spiritual practice. Without realizing it, actually, I started in a practice or a church called Unity, and back in 1970, where I met my late wife. And having that grounding, I feel in retrospect, has helped a lot. It's that's really the one thing that has been kind of grounding for me, that and meditation, and having that. But also did exercise. I did a lot of bike riding. My biological mother was born and raised around horses. So after I met her, I took horseback riding lessons, and I love it. So yeah, that having that connection with the animals and just that sort of thing. And so yeah, I'm complete with that for now.
All right, thank you. Well, let's go to Nicole. Same question, Nicole. What have been some of your coping strategies?
It's a great question. I think what you said in the beginning, Scott, about self-love is so important, because that's ultimately, I think, the goal of, working through the trauma and processing it and really understanding how it impacts you and your decisions and your feelings. And only when you have that awareness, you really overcome or change intentionally. And I've been on that journey for a while. Another passion of mine that I love, that I know is part of who I am naturally, because I've been in love with the written word since about fourth grade, when I had a poetry project, and I was just so excited about the opportunity to write something original and illustrate it. And now I'm in marketing and communications, and that was kind of a gift that I celebrate, because I know it's natural to me, because I've been doing it since I was a child. But that writing has been essential in my healing journey, from the darkest moments when I was really sad about my mother, and, just thinking about, where is she? Why did she leave me? And I didn't have an adoptive mother. I only had a father. I never had anyone to call mom. So Mother's Day has always been extremely difficult, and it always triggered me. And I would find myself just processing all these feelings, and it really helped me to write them down. My husband likes to say it's my dark poetry, but writing my feelings to process them has been instrumental to my self-awareness, as well as my ability to kind of cope. And in 2019, I actually started writing publicly on my blog and Instagram and Facebook. I started a platform called The Adoptee in Me, and I use that to share my feelings and my insights, and really ultimately to create an opportunity for adoptees to come together and share that journey of self-discovery. And those adoptee to adoptee connections are so healing and so valuable. And, sharing in writing with each other is really powerful and one of my favorite ways to cope. And I continue to do that. I volunteer for an adoptee support group called Fireside Adoptees. I've been on the leadership team for 2 years now. And since 21, and hosting chat meetings and talking to other adoptees in a forum like this, and sharing those experiences and supporting one another has been really instrumental as well.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. All right, well, let's go to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, what have been some of your coping strategies?
I would say they've grown and evolved over the years. I know when I was younger, writing for me as well, like Nicole, was so powerful for me, because I didn't know a lot of like my feelings and emotions and what truly was what I was experiencing. So being able to put that on paper, I remember I actually still have them. I used to write to my birth mother, like, who are you? What do you look like? Where are you? Like, why was I given up? And I just felt like I didn't know that at the time as a teenager, a 14-year-old girl. Yet so deeply therapeutic for me. And I would say over the years, two things that come to mind when you ask me that question. One is prayer. I have found prayer somewhere. The divine has been with me my whole life, and I'm so deeply grateful. Because if somebody would ask me, like, how did you find like your spiritual practice and your journey? Like, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Yet prayer has been a lifesaver for me. And just my spiritual practices, meditation. And I would say one of the big ones lately for me, I would say in the last 4 years or so, has been somatic therapy. So body-led therapy, just really being able to get out of my head and into my body, and moving those memories, moving that trauma that lives inside of my body. Because a lot of it is stuff I don't even remember, but it's there, it's impacting me. I actually have really struggled with some health issues over the years, and just knowing what I know now today about those health issues, that my body has just always, from the day that I was born, actually from when I was in the womb, has always been in fight or flight, because I was always searching for home until I found home inside of my own body, that my actual nervous system can just settle. Somatic therapy has definitely been life-changing for me.
Before we go to Joanne, do you want to share a little bit about your understanding of somatic therapy? And because I know it's something that is a big part of what you provide people. And so I think it's we were talking before the show began about how trauma is stored in the body, and anybody coping with trauma, somatic therapy is very valuable. So given what Elizabeth just shared, would you like to talk a little bit about that? And we'll go to Joanne.
All of our experiences live inside of our body, right? So everything that we've ever experienced has different places where it lives. I've been utilizing this, what was the name? There was a book many years ago called You Can Heal Your Life. There's many books on this, but there's one book called You Can Heal Your Life. And it was the correlation between our thoughts and our beliefs about who we are and body dis-eases. I had a weird experience recently where someone grabbed my neck and I've had a sore throat since. There's correlations there. But so when we are in experiences where we have separation traumas, or when we have physical, emotional traumas that happen, which then creates beliefs inside of us and traumas inside of us, that it will store or show up in ways that, like in an elbow or in places in your body. A lot of people with deep traumas have digestive issues, right? So in the sense of when you can't talk your way out of it in therapy, which I don't know how I like my talk therapist, but I also like my Gestalt therapist because this person brings in my body because I'm not separate from it. And there's ways to sort of unravel the trauma through the way that the body engages or disengages. So one of the an amazing tool, especially when you're feeling really overwhelmed or really afraid, is trauma shaking. There's another more technical term for it, but it's really like giving yourself the opportunity to shake. And just like an animal will shake. Does anyone do this? Does anyone else do this? I'm just being crazy over here.
No, I'm big on that. When I'm going through stuff, I shake and shiver and dance and quiver, and my understanding is it's sound and movement. Actually, another way is doing jumping jacks. If I've got stuff, I'll do jumping jacks and allow my voice to kind of take over.
So in the sense of like when you're feeling the fear of abandonment or your fears, is like you can shake it out. You've seen animals shake, and their nervous system is automatically shaking out the adrenaline, cortisol, and all the other chemicals that come with all of that, so that you're actually physically processing that trauma. Because sometimes we can get it caught in our heads. Like I've experienced a lot of trauma, and somatic experiencing or somatic body work or somatic therapy or even embodied Gestalt work, dance. But nonverbal work is incredibly important in moving through a lot of these traumas, and especially attachment issues. That's one of the things that's helped me with being a disorganized attacher. Very like kind of an abusive childhood with lots of abandonment stuff. So that's what I'll say there.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's go to Joanne. And Joanne, what have been some of your coping strategies?
I love to write. I am a much better writer than I am a speaker. For many years, I was silenced. I was told not to tell anyone I was adopted. I was to tell everybody that my brother, who's only 2 months older than I am, that we're twins. Writing has really helped me tremendously, and I've done very well with it. I've had many stories published. I just recently had a story published in the newspaper, which was a big shock to me. But a pastor asked me recently, he said, what made you start writing? I said, well, I wouldn't be alive if I wasn't writing, because it's the only way that I've been able to put the convoluted parts into writing and tell how I feel. I've learned a lot about myself by writing. I'm not as hard on myself as I used to be when I put it into words. So, and also I work with children, and I try to tell children what I spent 30 years as a longtime child care provider. I'm still friends with many of them. I got invited to 5 of their graduation parties this last year that I had as newborns. I like to tell children that they're important. I like to tell them what I didn't hear as a child. Mm-hmm. So that's my coping.
That's beautiful, giving to others that which we didn't get in our own life.
Yeah, I would have to say that the most important thing I've written is it's in a book called Dear Wonderful You. And I send it to children all over the United States that are in foster care. And then I hear that they're not being adopted, when they're teenagers. And I'm sorry, what? But I want them to know, what I never heard.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. So the next kind of question for everybody, and then we'll have an Omashar song. What's your spiritual journey being? How's this shaped? Because often when you have an unnatural childhood, some of you had, like Roger had a father that, instead of creating safety, was a source of fear. And that can impact how we view our relationship to God or to life. So I'm just curious about each person's spiritual journey. And again, we recognize and honor all spiritual traditions here. So again, we'll go in the same order. I'll go with you first, Roger.
I had to unmute. As I mentioned, I first started going to Unity back in 1970, and that spiritual journey has been with me for over 50 years. And I feel it's helped me a lot, although I have had a challenge meditating. And, recently, but after being diagnosed with PTSD and taking L-tyrosine for 3.5 years, and then in fall of 2015, something woke up in my brain, and I've been able to process that much better. I've had that grounding. I've been around quantum physics because one of the ministers there was talked about the relationship between spirituality and quantum physics every other week. And so I have that, but, I also speak to, I didn't find the a adoption community until I stumbled on it, literally, on Instagram. I got on Instagram and I saw something about adoptee, and I go, oh, let me investigate that. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. You asked me about the spiritual connection, but yeah, that community has been very almost a spiritual connection as well. It's been very cathartic. And I want to thank Chris for Trish for your shake it up. I want to thank you. I know that I've seen my dog do it all the time. Shake that, but I never related it to like shaking the somatic end of it, shaking the abandonment issues out. That's a good point. Thank you. Yeah.
Roger, I noticed that Mary, our other guest, did just arrive. So while we kind of hear from the others, maybe you could call her and just update her on where we are, and then we'll go to her after we do this next round.
I don't have her phone number, but I've been texting.
Okay, well, maybe she can't. Okay, usually, yeah.
I gave her your phone number, and I gave her my phone number. So,
okay, well, she's in the room now, so maybe you guys can just catch up.
I know that.
Okay. All right, Nicole, what would you like to share next?
Faith has been a really important central component of my journey from childhood. I was raised by a single father, a man of strong faith, and I'm very, I believe that the values that he instilled in me of, just loving others, respect, family, caring, being empathetic, being, a competitor in life, but empathetic to others around you, winning and playing and winning with grace. He taught me so many important values, and of course, to love God and to have faith in God, and that's definitely been such an important role in my journey. And when I think about my darkest times, believing that God is taking care of me and it will be okay. And I know, that I just have this sense of bad things can happen, but I'm going to be okay. And I believe that no matter how hard things get. One of my healing journey was really accelerated after my divorce from my son's father. And I had to believe that because it was a dark time and I felt like I lost everything. And I felt like I ruined the family and oh my gosh, so much guilt. So I just had to believe, and I got through it. And when my son went to the military right after high school, I had separation anxiety and I never thought I'd be myself again, but I had to believe and I got through it. So faith has gotten me through everything. And I'll also say a little twist in my story that is kind of interesting is that single man who adopted me entered the seminary later in life. He never was married. I think my attachment issues were too strong. I kind of got in between him and his dates. But when I was in college, he entered the seminary and became a priest. And yes, so my faith and his guidance and humble leadership is really has been central to my journey. And I also think about the identity issues that we have as adoptees, and I've done all these tests and the Strength Finders tests. One of my top strengths is connectedness, and I think that a lot of connectedness is so important, and it's like what this show is about, right? It's about our connection to each other and the earth. And I believe we are all connected. And I believe that the power of connectedness has also been very important in my healing journey, and finally feeling like I belong in spaces where there's other adoptees and people who, I know I'm not alone. And that's an important message for other adoptees, that you're not alone and that you do belong, even though you might not have felt like you belonged, in the beginning.
Nicole, thank you so much for sharing that. And I've said this on the show before. It is really, really important to have a spiritual practice. And most of the clients I work with are going through crises, getting divorced, to considering divorce, dealing with death, cancer. Many people are losing their parents now. And people that have a practice, and it can be of a religious nature, or it can be a martial art form, it can be yoga, it can be meditation, it can be playing a musical instrument. I mean, those are all practices. But the people I know that have a practice and they can go play the guitar, they can go do yoga, they can do martial arts, cope so much more easily. And the ones who don't have a practice, then just the mind spins and then they get sick and all that sort of thing. So I really appreciate what you're saying. And I was just wanting to emphasize how important it is to have a practice.
I
And
agree
don't know,
100%.
Trish, if there's anything you want to add to that. No. Okay. All right. Well, we'll go to our next person, and that's of course Elizabeth. Elizabeth, what would you like to share?
Gosh, I feel your share so deeply, Nicole. And Scott, what a great question, especially coming from an adoptee who trust is a big thing. So how you pose the question of being an adoptee and struggling with what I heard is trust and being able to maybe even depend or rely on the divine, like how has that showed up in my life? I didn't grow up in a home that had any sort of spiritual practices at all. And I just was led, I just thought I would go to church one day when I was in my early 20s. And I just went to a couple different churches. And what I knew is that every time I sat in church, and I always went by myself, I was just finding my way, and I just cried every single time I walked into a church. And I was like, this was when I was still pretty armored up and guarded as a person. Now I'm very much a crier all the time, no matter what. So I was like, it really was like intriguing to me of like, why am I like crying? And so I found a spiritual center that I really connected with, and I still would always cry in conversation with other people. I really realized that I was crying because Spirit was speaking to me, and I was so connected, and it just moves me to tears. And so over the last, I would say 20 years, have I really found, what speaks to me. My spiritual home here in Phoenix is Unity. And it's been a home of mine for 15 years. And I did, in the beginning of like my spiritual journey, I did question, like, how does this all work? Like, I really was finding my way on my own. And I guess when I say on my own, I don't have like a reference of like my childhood or a previous like spiritual journey or practice. And I think it took me a little bit, considering like my background, being an adoptee, being relinquished. Trust was a big thing for me, and to really feel deeply that there was Mother, Father, God, universe, Spirit that had my best interests at heart. It took me a little bit. And when I started to connect the dots and I look back at the reciprocal of evidence that I had in my life, that who I call today God has walked with me all along, like I couldn't help but just be deeply moved. And I felt so held, and I still feel so deeply held on this journey. And my faith is very, very important to me. And I love what you said. I have experience of kind of trying to do this alone. And my life was complete chaos, and it was very hard. And I tried to control everything. And when I really just let go and just trusted that my God was holding me, like my life is just remarkable. And it flows. And so that's kind of been a little bit about like my spiritual journey, and so deeply important to me today.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. Yeah, and I want to say for those of you who have a spiritual practice, that's beautiful. Do more. And for those who don't, if anybody's watching this, and often I work a lot, especially men who look away from the church. Most of us, many of us, the original religion we were raised with, we ended up becoming disillusioned with. We saw the dogma, we saw the bullshit, we saw the hypocrisy, and we broke away. Not all, but many of us. But what's beautiful is when you find that spiritual practice, you walked into a church and you felt it, right? Trish has a spiritual practice with her cat, no doubt, Winston. And whatever works, right? I have a close relationship with my dog. That's part of my spiritual practice. So any of you who don't have a spiritual practice, please do either go back to one you had previously or cultivate a new one. All right, Joanne, what's your relationship to the divine been like, and how has that evolved through this process?
Oh, it's been a very, very difficult journey. My mother was raised in a strong Mormon family in Utah. She's the only one who walked away from her the church. I have 42 first cousins, all Mormon. I'm the only non-Mormon of all of them. My grandmother by adoption was a Smart, Elizabeth Smart's close relative. I've had a really hard time trusting anybody, and the spiritual journey's been hard, but if you hear my story, you know that God's been holding on to me the whole time. I have a hard time trusting people because my relatives are not very nice when it comes to genealogy or anything. And they said that after my adopted mother died, they'd be her voice. And even if she was abusive, it didn't matter, they'd make things right. So it's been very hard to accept that she was so abusive, but they're going to make her right. So, but that's my story.
So I'm gonna bring everybody back up for a bit, and again, it's natural that when we've had an unnatural childhood, or when we've had the kind of difficulties that you have described, there's what's our interpretation? How do we interpret it? And so often, children who have been abused, or you in a second, Trish, interpreted that, oh, there's something wrong with me, or this is the way the world treats me. So I want to hear from Trish, and then I want to hear if any of you have had to deal with reframing that, maybe starting by thinking this is the way the world treats you, or that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, and then coming around.
Scott, Mary is here and is wondering if she's in the right place.
Mary, you are in the right place, and now that you know that you're here, we will go to you after we hear from people about this particular question.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I was going to say.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you're here, Mary, and everybody else was kind of here for our pre-show meeting. So we'll go to you in just one moment to hear your story, but I just want to hear some of the responses to that issue of did you feel like there was something fundamentally wrong with you, or this is the way the world treats me, and how you've managed that journey. And any of you can speak to it. Anybody want to tackle that? Nicole, I noticed you kind of.
Sure. Yeah, I resonate with that deeply. I definitely felt deeply flawed as a child because in my little brain, it didn't make sense. How can my mother leave me with a babysitter and never come back? It didn't make sense. So I always thought something was wrong with me. That's the only answer that made sense to me. And even though I internalized that, I don't think I realized I internalized it as much as I did until I started on my journey of self-discovery and realized that my lack of self-confidence, all of the kind of issues that I had relating to others, and some of my challenges were because of that belief. So I love what you said about reframing, and that's exactly what I did. I realized after being in touch with other adoptees that my feelings were a natural reaction to a very abnormal situation, and that it wasn't about me, and that I now could take control back, and that I didn't have to be a victim. And as an adult, I can live the life that I want and deserve. Sadly, that is, with living with that loss, but at the same time, I reconciled that I can do the best I can with my life. And it's up to me now. It's not about what my mother did to me. It's not about, how I felt rejected or abandoned. I'm here. I have a purpose, and it's up to me to make the most of this life that I have. So that's my reframe, is that, I or anyone doesn't have to be a victim of circumstances beyond their control. I didn't cause the problem, and it's not a problem. I'm just here to live my life. And I think it's really powerful and empowering once you change the way you view your circumstances.
Yay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for addressing that. Before we go to Mary, would anybody else like to address that issue? How you managed, shifting out of thinking that there was something fundamentally wrong with you?
I'll yeah, I'm unmuted. I will talk to that. Both my adopted parents and my biological mother were told that I had cerebral palsy when I was born, and that's come to believe that's not true. Whatever happened to me at birth, I was not recruited or into the Army in the 60s, which is not a bad thing, but in my opinion. But it's after I got married, I started going to the gym and working out. And, in my teenage years, I found that I could go skiing and do things that were just not, nobody thought I could do. And, later on in the 80s, when I started working with computers and computer-aided drafting and stuff, my adopted dad said, couldn't relate to it. Couldn't relate to what I was doing, and just kind of didn't really dismiss me, just couldn't relate. And so I, that was part of my coping thing, finding that I could do things that I thought were didn't really fit into my family either. And so another thing I do want to mention is that in 98, my brother, who was also an adoptee, was ruled by the coroner. He passed away and ruled by the coroner a suicide. But I don't want to get into too much around that, other than but he was into drugs, and my family felt that he was not, that coroner was not correct. But anyway, that's enough on that. But so I just learned to deal with it, to have that coping, but also there were times when things would happen and I would just go out by myself and just be by myself. So that helps too, just to have that alone time as well. So anyway, go ahead and bring Mary on.
I'm gonna go to Trish for her comment on this, and then we're gonna finally go to Mary.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people can relate to this, whether or not you're adopted. Go ahead, Trish.
Thanks for your patience, Mary. I think that many of us have the feeling that we're fundamentally unlovable, or that we are not enough, or we are unworthy. And from my sociological studies and, the studies where I'm really, y'all know me a little bit. What I've understood is that when they separated us and told us that we were separate from God, or separate from the universe, or separate from each other, is where one of the biggest harms really started. Is that socially now we're told that we have a punishing God if we're not good enough. And socially, the way that impacts is that our humanness becomes like our pure humanness. Like, humans are chaotic, wild. We want what we want in our bodies and in our minds is belonging, connection, safety, community. That's what we deeply want. That's what our bodies want. And so when they tell us that, you know, you're supposed to be an individual and you have like, you're only supposed to love one person, and you have, you know, you're separating yourself from this whole community. You're separate from God, that this God won't love you if you're not perfect. And that we understand that this idea of perfection is something that we're striving for. Well, I hate to break it to you that only white men can probably participate in this perfection piece, because that doesn't really exist anymore. And so everyone else is sitting here like, oh, I've got a wart on my toe and I don't look like those people, and I'll never be thin enough, and I'll never have that much money, and I'll never be that educated, and, you know, I'll never belong because of that. That one of the ways to really start to dissolve that patterning is to recognize that it's sort of a conditioned program, and that you find the people in your life that treat you the way that better than you treat yourself, and you hold on to them. Because many of us, regardless of whether we were adopted, or maybe we're trans, or maybe we're gay, or maybe we had really crazy, manipulative, abusive parents, or maybe you're just a little too weird for your family and you have to tort to be that is not me. I'm the weird one. If you wanted to know, you got it.
Well, I know that.
Elizabeth, I see your hand up, and then I promise we really will go to Mary. Truly, we will. But I want to hear what you have to say, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I would love to share on that question. I would say that until I knew different, I definitely felt like there was something inherently wrong with me. Because why would my mother give me up? Like, there had to be something wrong with me for my mother to give me up, because nothing could be wrong with her, right? You know, and knowing that, like, the way that I view myself and how I feel about myself starts from a very young age. I had no other choice until I could start to think for myself and realize that I actually had a choice of, like, how did I want to view myself? Like, here is my situation and what do I want to do with it? I wanted to share because I had a very interesting experience. When my birth mother passed away, I received some medical records of hers and some of her journaling. And there's a few things that I discovered. One was that I read actually from her hospital stay when I was born. I actually dove into this probably, I want to say in 2020. I just was like, I'm kind of curious. And I had the capacity at the time. And I read that my mother held on to me for 7 hours in the hospital.
Wow.
And I was so, like, deeply moved because the stories that I heard about my birth mother growing up were very far from the truth. And I was like, wow, like, what if I would have known that when I was a 14-year-old little girl trying to make it in this world, feeling so alone? Like, that would have it was so touching for me. And then I connected with my biological mother's side of the family, and I was actually having dinner with my aunt just a few weeks ago. And she goes, I just don't know if I should tell you this. She goes, but when I had my cousin, my first daughter, she goes, your birth mother came over and she was holding her. And she said, it really must be nice that you got to keep your daughter. And I share this from a place of my birth mother didn't want to give me up. One of those birth mothers that was coerced into giving me up. And I see now with that perspective that the amount of trauma that she must have endured, and just knowing those little bits of information from an adoptee who was not raised by her biological family, those two pieces of information are so valuable for me. So it's taken me some time to reframe that there's actually nothing wrong with me, that my response to life is very natural considering the environment that I grew up in and the situation. There's nothing wrong with me. But I wish I could go back in time, and I wish maybe somebody was there to talk to that little girl, Elizabeth, because that's when I think it would have really mattered the most, and made such a huge impact for me.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that part of the story, and
So
one of the things that stands out for me is that it reminds us that healing and breakthroughs can come at any age in life. Like we don't have to stay stuck in a bad story. We don't have to be stuck. That at any age in life we can get new information, have a new spiritual practice, or get new information like you did that can help us to reframe the story. Yeah. All right, drum roll, please. I'm finally going to go to Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hello, I'm so sorry. I just technological stuff like goes over my head. So I know.
Well,
I'm here.
hopefully the internet gods will be kind.
Yes,
I'm noticing that your internet connection is a little wobbly, but please share with us your story. And we've kind of had people share their story and then what their coping mechanisms have been, or what their spiritual journey of dealing with it has been like.
right. Well, up until I retired 10 years ago, I really didn't know how deeply I had been affected by being an adopted person. I knew I had issues, and I had an inkling that they were related to adoption, but I wasn't really sure. Because I was bullied a lot when I was in school. I was adopted through Catholic Charities from Cleveland. I was born at St. Anne's Hospital in downtown Cleveland. Not even a hospital then. It was called St. Anne's Unwed Mothers Home and Baby Asylum. And I'm one of the babies that were in the asylum. But and then I went, after I was born, I was in foster care for 9 months before I went to my adoptive parents' home. I was their first child. They adopted my younger brother is adopted also. He's not my biological brother, just my adopted brother. So it was just the four of us. I call us the paper family. It hit me one day when we were driving down the road, and we were actually going on vacation. My brother and I were in the back, my mom and dad were in the front. And I kind of looked around as we were stopped at this light, and I realized that nobody in this car was actually related to each other. We're just a paper family. I mean, I loved them dearly, and they did the very best they could, but there was something missing, and I just couldn't get over it. And my mother had some issues. She came from her own trauma. Of course, all of this is stuff I've learned since opening up and falling apart. When I retired, I developed really bad PTSD. I was an emergency room trauma nurse for 34 years. And when I retired, I went a little bit nuts. And I realized after a while this must be PTSD, ER trauma. Started treating that. In the process of trying to get over that, once I got to the point where I could get back outside and function in society again, it took me about 2.5 years. The childhood stuff came back, and I realized that adoption might be an issue. So I just did the old Google search, and I came up in a Facebook, and here I am 5 years later now. Actually, I've been retired 10 years. It was 2 years into retirement that it hit me that adoption might be the issue, and I started researching. I my spiritual life and how it affects everything with me is that I was raised Catholic. Imagine that, Catholic Charities. But I went to Catholic school for 12 years,
Wow.
and I sat there through listening. When you go to Catholic school, especially back in the 50s, you at that time, that was before what we called the Ecumenical Council of the Catholic Church, when they changed a lot of rules. So at that point in time, you couldn't have anything to eat after midnight if you were going to go to communion in the morning. And every Catholic school, you started school with church, and you went to mass, and you received communion. So you carried your lunch or your breakfast to school in a bag. About fourth grade, the Ecumenical Council had met, and now you could eat up to an hour before school. So we all got, or before mass. So we all got to eat breakfast in school. Well, that kind of stuck in my head. I'm thinking, wow, how comes, so 4 years ago, we had to bring our lunch or our breakfast, and now we're allowed to eat and then go to communion an hour before. And then by the time I graduated high school, they were handing us the host and we were putting it in our own mouth. Where before, if the priest dropped the host during this period of time, they brought out all these altar boys, and we won't go there. But they brought up all those altar boys, and they stood around this host, and the priest came out. And there was a big to-do about picking this wafer up off the ground, because in the Catholic Church, they believe that really turns into the blood and body, or the body of Jesus Christ. And that when they drop the wafer, that's Jesus laying on the ground. So anyway, lots and lots of strange things go on in Catholicism. So anyway, after 12 years of Catholicism, I came out of high school an agnostic, because I knew that the God that I had been taught about was not congruent enough for me to have faith in, because it just didn't make sense. And then the bullying and things that teachers had said to me, it was just too much of a discrepancy. And I think that that's what happened, is I got lost in the lies and the discrepancies and the issues, and I had no one to talk to, because as soon as the word adoption, you're adopted, comes out, everyone says, aren't you lucky? Aren't you blessed? And are you? No, I might be, and I love my parents and they're good parents, but no, there's this whole thing that's messed up. And they could say, no, just forget about it. It's not important. And I'm thinking, yes, but you still sing me happy birthday once a year. So if it's not important, why are you still singing me happy birthday? None of it made sense for me. And I think that that's why I got so lost in other people. And I ended up marrying an alcoholic who abused me emotionally and very rarely physically. Unless he was really drunk. I ended up leaving him 15 years later, I went to put myself through nursing school. He sobered up my last year in nursing school. I think he knew I was going to leave if he didn't. Things were great for like 2 years, and then he went off the wagon, and I couldn't do it anymore. I gave him an opportunity, and he chose to continue drinking. So I packed up my children and moved to Georgia from Ohio. And that's where I raised my children, in Georgia, which was a good move at the time, because it was right smack in the middle of the Bible Belt. And at that point, I had joined. So then what the whole God was. After all of that, at this point in time, I'm completely alienated from my adult children. They cannot understand why my brain doesn't work right, and it hasn't worked right for a long time. I function, and they can't see. They can't comprehend. They think I should be over it. It's in the past. You had wonderful parents, and my son and I cut ties this morning. I have some long story, but there's going to be no more contact because he just can't be nice. He doesn't like. I'm an embarrassment to him. He's right smack in the middle of the Bible Belt. And with everything that's going on in the world right now, I am the enemy, and he thinks I'm going to hell. So there we are. It's just not been a really good day, which is probably why I had such a hard time getting on, because I don't do well when I'm stressed.
Mhm.
Something that was said earlier about, making the best and being grateful and moving forward and everything, which I find difficult given the scenario that we are still doing this to children. And I know as a nurse and soon to be a nurse practitioner specializing in holistic and mental health, holistic medicine and mental health, I know that early intervention is the key to making our brains function in the manner they were meant to function. And truth is the number one thing we need. I mean, I knew my mother didn't give me up because she loved me. It just didn't make any sense. What woman gives up kid up because they love them? So there were all of those issues. And I found out when I searched 5 years ago, I didn't meet my parents because they were both dead. But I do have 11 brothers and sisters. I have one that just showed up recently. She is 20 years younger than the rest of us. She's a paternal sister. And her story is that our dad was a singer in a rock and roll band, and he met her mother, who kept her. And they had a one-nighter. And there's my sister, who's 20 years younger. But then she started talking to me about being in Canton, Ohio. And I said, wait a minute. I said, what bar was Daddy playing at when he met your mother? And she told me, and I said, oh my God, I partied in that same bar, which
Wow.
means, given the, I don't know if you're aware of what's called GSA, genetic sexual attraction, but it is an issue. It's based on the fact that there's a familiarity when you first meet a genetic relative that you've never felt before. And that sometimes gets interpreted as versus just the feeling of possible intimacy that we've always sexualized. And so boundaries get crossed. So knowing this and hearing her story and knowing I had been in that bar means that I could have very well been there on a night that my father was playing in that bar. I would not have known it was him, and he may have hit on me, and I could have given birth to my own sister. So it's got to stop. I mean, we got to take the lies out. There's no reason to be lying to people about who gave birth to them and where they came from, and completely legally severing us from our biological families. We shouldn't have to fight City Hall to know our story. It should come with us. It's 2023. The lies, if removed, will allow children that are placed for adoption to at least carry with them the knowledge of what they know is true in their gut. And that was the hardest thing for me, because I have this great, big, huge, sensitive thing in my gut, and I don't even gauge, I guess, or just my intuition. And I know when people are lying to me, but then I get doubted, and then I doubt it because they say, oh, no, that's not right. Oh, no, that's not right. We're not saying that. We're not saying that. We don't mean this. But I don't know, it continues. So my thing is that I recently just got diagnosed with, I'm placed on the ASD scale. It took me 2.5 years to get diagnosed because of my age. I'll be 71 in December, and they have to do a 2-year testing to make sure that it's not a early Alzheimer's or early dementia setting in, and I passed that. That's not. And also recently diagnosed with ADHD. So I'm learning how to treat those things, and things are coming back into play. But the 34 years I spent in the ER, on top of the trauma that I had already experienced that I knew nothing about, that was never treated, my mind is never going to be right again, but my heart's in the right place. I'm intelligent, and I can allow my heart to do the leading. Unfortunately, we coincide within a framework of people that are hurting, and other adoptees tend to not like people moving forward. Let's put it that way. And it's sad because, you know, there's a whole existence for us that we can move on into the universe and be part of the whole collective and who we're supposed to be, and have a sense of authenticity and congruency and transparency, that we can stand proud and be the person we were created to be. And that's all. I have 3 families. I have a family that gave birth to me. I have a family that a foster family that kept me for 9 months. I learned to walk and talk there. I had 5-year-old foster brothers. And then at 9 months of age, a social worker came and got me and took me to my parents' home and dropped me off, and that was it. You know, bye. So, and I'm not supposed to be traumatized by any of that. But I was 9 months old. I waved, you know, the lady
Of
left me at the
course.
house.
You know,
Along
like
with
you,
her.
and like you said, you know, the brain development, and there's so many elements of the trauma that you and the others that we've heard have gone through. You know, thank you very much, Mary. And I'm noticing, of course, there's a lot of comments coming up in the chat box of people just really appreciating all of your stories. And thank you. And recognizing, like Roger said early on, every person's story is different. There are certain similarities and commonalities. And everybody's healing journey and everybody's life path is different. And I recognize that some of you are further down the path of learning how to work with this in a way that isn't disrupting your life as much. And others are still really in the throes of it. And I want to build that out to our greater audience, you know. For those who have been able to learn how to work with their childhood wounding or their disillusionments and they're further down the path, that's beautiful. And for those that are still really in the pain of things, maximum compassion and maximum grace, you know. And each and every one of us has our own unique journey. Trish, I'd love to just ask if you have anything you'd like to share to kind of wrap us up here.
Thank you all for being so vulnerable this evening. I know that it's a lot to come on a show with however many people who might be watching live as well as in the room and recording. And your stories make a difference. You sharing makes a difference because it gives the people an opportunity to connect to you, to connect to their own stories and to understand that they're not alone. And they're not weird, and that there are other people who are just as like moving or struggling, or, you know. I think it's a really courageous.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, see.
It's a really fact to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to close out in a moment. I just want to make a couple of quick announcements. I want to remind people that we have started doing meditations every night, including tonight. Of course, I didn't want to interrupt today's show, but I've seen some of our Global Peace Tribers. Sylvia has been coming to our meditations. And so every evening at 6:30 p.m., I just put into the chat box the link. And it's a combination of Twin Ray Community and Global Peace Tribe. And for those of you who are watching on Facebook or on one of our broadcast partners, I'll also put up a poster. And the meditations are, they're non-denominational, they're interfaith. And every night, 6:30 p.m., it's free, there's no charge. Would love to have you join us. We have different members of the Twin Ray community. We do these meditations live here in Ashland, Oregon at the Haven. which is this beautiful new spiritual center that I'm helping to manage. But then we also broadcast it online. So I want to just definitely invite people to join us any night that you want to join us. And the meditations last anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes. And if any of you are coming through Ashland, let me know. We're doing amazing events. We've got Jaya Lakshmi is going to play here next week. Gary Melkin, many of you have seen Gary on our shows. He's going to be playing here soon. Jamishka is going to be playing. So we're doing some really fun live events. And again, I just want to thank all of our presenters, like Trish said, for just sharing so vulnerably. And we always like to close with an Omashar song, and God bless him. He wrote this song specifically for tonight, and it's called The Way Things Are. I'm guessing it's going to be about learning to accept. Here we go.
What do you see when you're alone? What do you feel when you are by yourself? How could it be that you are here? Isn't it strange the way things are? Look at the river flowing by, and look at the colors of the butterfly. How do you feel about your life? Isn't it strange the way things are? A dolphin in the ocean, I can hear you calling me. Come on in, you say, the water's fine. I have come to set you free. You have never been alone, my friend. I was just a thought away. There's a deeper love that's holding you, and it's here to lead the way. La la la. Now that you see you're not alone, and there is no such thing as by yourself. There is a hand that's lifting you into the presence of yourself. Life is a tale that never ends. There is a purpose to each heart that beats, and you are the river flowing by. You are the colors of the butterfly, like a dolphin in the ocean. I can hear you calling me. Come on and you say, the water's fine. I have come to set you free. You have never been alone, my friend. I was just a thought away. There's a deeper love that's holding you, and it's here to lead the way. La 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 la. The water's fine, I have come to set you free. You have never been alone, my friend. I was just a thought away. There's a deeper love that's holding you and it's here to lead the way. La, la, la,
Wow, beautiful. And thank you, Eleanor Joy. I had that on your website. Here, let me go back and we'll go back to you showing your, who do you got there? I got one too, only mine's
Okay,
mine.
this is Bobby Bear.
Bobby Bear.
This
Okay,
is
well,
Bobby Bear.
we
Not quite as alive as Jasmine Bear.
I'm going to add Sylvia. And who do you got there, Sylvia?
This is little sis. And she was with me the last 3.5 months.
Aw,
Beautiful. Well,
sweet.
and Jasmine Bear just got her summer. I don't know
Hi,
if you can
Jeff.
tell.
Oh, Jasmine's been to the groomers.
She's been to the groomer. She got her
Yes.
summer cup today. So,
Very good. Marvelous show, Scott. Marvelous show.
well, thank you, Eleanor.
Maximum grace to everyone who presented. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring up everybody one more time. Let's bring up all of our guests and thank you so much for sharing. Let's see. There's Roger and there's Elizabeth. There's Mary. I feel like Dorothy talking to everybody at the end of The Wizard of Oz. I think I'm going to miss you most, Mr. Roger. So thank you, everybody, for being with us. One last announcement. I just want to remind people that every Thursday morning, there's something very wonderful that I always try and join, and that's the Self-Love Show. And this is, of course, Trish and her partner, Dawn, every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock Pacific time. Who do you got as your guest tomorrow, Trish?
I don't even know.
Well, there you have it. But we know that whoever it'll be wonderful.
It will be wonderful. I've been on vacation, kind of. So I just got back. It will be wonderful. And Dawn and I haven't seen each other in a good bit. So it'll probably be giggly and cackly and all of that beautiful stuff. So
Okay.
I'm really looking.
Mark points out that you are, Dawn, are always a handful, and I agree, a handful of love. A handful
You are.
handful of self-love. There's Mark.
Thanks.
All right. Oh, good to have you back, Trish. Welcome back. Thank you again, everybody, for being with us on Saturday night's show. We've got, it's going to be Soul Search again. And Tangela is launching Soul Search TV. And we're going to have all the different hosts of her upcoming TV shows joining us. And then we also have Sheila Seppi. She runs the Conscious Awakening Network joining us. And I actually just added a friend of yours, Trish, Dr. Marty Casey, is going to join us on Saturday night. So that's our next show. All right, everybody. I'm going to go to gallery view. Oh, yes, Sylvia?
Oh, just blessings.
Okay. Blessings, everybody. We'll see you either for one of our meditations or we'll see you on Saturday night. And thank you again to all of our presenters.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.